Alright, so apologies if the traffic's noisy. Hopefully you can hear. So I've had a number of questions recently, and I was going to answer them specifically, but I think I'll just answer them broadly and just talk from experience and try and point directly to this. And the aim is to feel or taste what I'm pointing to. Feel or taste what's actually here, such that the obstructions, the illusions, what's suggested as a reality or a narrative, as me being something separate, as me needing to figure something out conceptually, such that they can come into focus as what they are, which is not really here, referring to something that's not actually here. And when that's clear, that's all you need. They'll fall away on their own. But the point is direct investigation, direct experience. So you might feel that, or if you're someone that feels like, I don't know if you consider yourself or describe yourself as having had an awakening or a shift, or have tasted what I'm always pointing to, have let's say directly come in contact with or directly experienced something that's more real than what you took yourself to be before, a more primary, more fundamental experience of, I guess you could call it identity or what you are. This came into experience. Be that in a peak experience, or even if it's the sense that I've tasted something, I've experienced something that has changed the way I experience myself. It might be in hindsight, it might not even be clear when it happened, or it might not make sense conceptually. It might not be something that you can pin down and rationalize or explain, but it can be felt. Tasted something more real than what we considered real to be before in regards to identity, and it's changed something about how we experience life. But there's also a continuation of struggle. There's a deep feeling that this isn't quite done yet, that I need to gain something back or recall or relive maybe an experience, or everything maybe even just got a little bit more confusing. Maybe everything got a little bit scarier, because now there is a loosening of the grip on the conceptual frameworks of identity that we use to orient ourselves in life and feel like, I know what I am, I know what's going on here. And that glimpse or that change in perception has diminished a lot of the reality of that narrative, the reality of that identity. So now it might possibly be an uncomfortable place to be, and it might lead to that half in, half out experience that I talk about, where I've experienced a more real experience of what I actually am, what this actually is, life, self, identity, experience. But yet there are these conditionings and patterns and thoughts. They're still striving there, they're still suffering there. There's still that tendency to take a position as something separate from an experience or a quality or a reality that I'm referring to from that position as something separate from it. There's that deep and automatic tendency to hold a point of view so that we can then relate to something from a vantage point or from a position, such that then we can piece together an understanding of it that makes us feel comfortable. It makes us feel like we know what's going on. That makes this awakening thing seem manageable and like it can be controlled by me, the central character. There seems to remain a tendency say for example, I fully believe I am the independent agent, the always here, discrete, separate entity inside the head, the thinker of thoughts, the one that refers to my life from this subjective position, the one that refers to the objective content of my mind as the thinker, as the separate subject. When we investigate that or slow the through meditation the momentum of thought, such that we can pause or stall that illusion, that illusion of the continuous me, the continuous subject in here, relating to thought, resisting thought, labeling thought, concepts and stories about past and future, my awakening, my journey, and so on. And we can slow that down to the point where this is just a model, so hold it lightly, to the point where that subject-object dynamic, that constantly referring to a thought which then informs another thought, which then informs another thought, giving the illusion of continuity, of a continuous subject, a continuous thinker here, referring to this thought experience as something separate from it. When that slows down to the extent where we see from no particular position, right, or it just becomes clear that entire experience appears within and as what we actually are. As in, there's no separate thing referring to the thoughts in here, who is in control of the thoughts, who the thoughts all point back to and refer to. That's merely suggested in the content and the context of thought. That subject, that thinker, co-arises with the objective thoughts and then vanishes in a transient way and isn't always here. But there's something here, an experience, an awareness, you might call it, a knowingness. Within which that entire experience plays out, let's say, but is not separate from. So there's just thought, no thinker, just thought. Even when that has that subject-object dynamic in the space of thought has collapsed, or it's diminished in its reality, something's changed about it, which has a profound effect on how I experience myself. It's no longer a solid me in here, a solid subject. It opens things up, so to speak. It dilates the aperture of experience up in a very freeing way. We're no longer confined to being the subject of my thoughts, or the one that all the thoughts, the uncomfortable thoughts, are happening to. It's a giving up, it's a letting go. And that letting go happens spontaneously when clarity arises through clear seeing or investigation. But there still seems to remain these deeper tendencies, and these deeper tendencies are mind or thought-based assumptions that are rooted in you could almost say they're like hiding as a filter that or an augmented overlay that's integrated into direct physical experience, making it look, or assuming, making it look like I am a separate thing here. This is me, the center point. I am the background that watches all experience pass by, be it transient. And in that there's a form of disassociation, a form of separateness, although it's much more subtle. It is much deeper, and these assumptions are much faster. You could say further down or further back, to put a kind of spatial model on it, but when we're caught up in the content of thought as the thinker, let's say you, bad language, don't have access to that because you're one step ahead of it, you're looking past it. As that initial duality collapses, that subject-object split as me, the thinker, and my thoughts collapses, then what comes into focus is sensation. Because we're not caught up in an internal world, because the thought isn't folded in itself to create this internal world, we're not living through a mind-based reflection of reality, of what we think this is, then it opens what's here up. Hang on, bear with me here. So it brings what is actually here up into the forefront of attention, or into the forefront of awareness or experience. And that's sensation, you could call it. And we could just call thought another sense for now. So then we, in immediate reality, not in a mind space that's assumed to be separate from immediate sensate reality, we begin the same investigation, the same deconstruction of the deeply held assumptions that through memory have accumulated to become what we think this is. a separate world out there with a separate me in here. So these next steps are the entry point to no self-realization, or anatta, or whatever you'd like to call it. The deepening levels of realization. What also comes to the forefront of experience is emotion, being a sensation. Because there's no conceptual framework of identity holding, possessing the sensations, the emotions, contextualizing them, or creating escape routes to get away from them, or coping mechanisms to be able to repress them and deal with them. It comes to the forefront of experience quite spontaneously. So that's why often we have an uncomfortable time post-awakening, because there's no longer a filter between sensate reality or sensation or experience and the one who's experiencing. The internal subject in here as the experiencer has been seen through. So now all we have is the sensation. We don't have any steps in between. We don't have any layer or filter or barrier between me and what's actually here. What's actually here begins to spill into this disassociative safe space that we created throughout a lifetime, suggested in the content of thoughts, made of thoughts, you could say. And it can be an uncomfortable place to be, because it's no longer clear what the solution to the uncomfortable sensations is. Whereas before we had built up often subconscious coping mechanisms to deal with them, often avoidant, often based on a value system, conceptual value system, made in mind, saying this I like, this I don't like, desire and aversion. So then what's left to investigate is direct experience, sensation, the sensed life, the sensed world. And there are a lot of assumptions there. So does it seem like there are multiple senses, multiple sensations, multiple sensed objects, distinct from each other? Does it feel like you, the center point, the subject, are an always here, consistent and continuous entity, observing the sensed world as something separate from you? So let's investigate that. And we'll not jump to any conceptual conclusions, because this isn't a conclusion. It doesn't appear like a conclusion. It's not satisfying for the mind. You could say in the way the mind, or that thinker, that separate subject, that me, can't understand this conceptually, can't understand this with the mind through thought, through analysis or interpretation, but the tendency is very strong, will still be very strong, to take a position as something relating to something else, as a subject relating to an object of experience, but this time it's more immediate. So is there, in the senses, any real and directly perceivable separation between any of the senses, the thought? Is the thought actually separate from the scene, this image that's appearing? Tricky one when we go to thought, but without using a thought-based conclusion, without using concept, can you in direct experience find a real distinction between thought and what's seen? Can you in experience find a distinction between the sound and what's seen, the sight? Is there any delineation there? Is there any threshold between the two that can be found in experience? Can you in experience find any distinction, any separation between the physical sensations, the sense perception, and the sound? Or the sense, perception, touch, and what's seen? Without using thought to conclude or confirm. We don't need thought for this at all. And you can do the same with the other senses. We might start to notice something strange, that there's no answer to this. Unless you just jump into the conceptual bandwagon and start theorizing about it. But can you find those distinctions? Can you find those limits in experience? Are these sense perceptions separate experiences? Any experience right now, is there any more than one? Again, not great language. Is there any more than one scene, image appearing? Is there any more than one sound? Watch for the mind taking a position and referring to the sound, and then categorizing it, labeling it, separating it out. Are there separate sounds in direct experience? Or is there one sound? What do we need to have separate sounds? Something to perceive them, to label them separate, and time. Does any of that exist in the sound unless we use thought to augment that point of view, that perception, onto the raw sense perception? Is there any more than one sensation, one physical sense, touch? If we're really, how would you say, pragmatic or ruthless with this, can we say that there's more than one sense? Or is it the one sense appearing so simultaneously, so seamlessly that it doesn't exist in time? It doesn't have dimensions. Does the sound have shape? What would we have to reference to give the sound a shape? Does the sensation, the tactile feeling, touch, does that have a shape? Does it have borders? Does it have dimensions? in the scene? Are there separate objects distinct from each other in what scene? Can anything ever be seen on its own, separately? Can any object ever present itself as truly distinct, truly discrete, truly separate from the totality of the scene? Or is it just one scene, one sense? Then we can look back and investigate this background. This consistently assumed mystery of me, this perspective upon which everything is appearing somehow separate from it. Where is it? Where is the background? Where is the me back here, observing all of this coming and going? If we turn the attention back and try and find that, is it even there? If we try and find, where am I hearing the sounds from? And is it separate from the sound? Where is the me hearing? Can it be found? I'm a rapper now, apparently. And then watch what the mind does. Watch that tendency to take a position and refer to something, a thought. Spatially mapping what this is in a way that can be known. Where is the thinker separate from the thought? Where is this vantage point I'm apparently looking from? Can I say it's anywhere unless I use something relative and objective to base that conclusion on? Or is it nowhere? Or is it just here? We begin to see that this is hollow. This assumption here that we've constructed in mind is hollow, it's empty, it's not actually here. It's a series of transient thoughts that appear, and within those thoughts there's an assumption, there's a suggestion that I am here is the always here, continuous observer that is the background, the observer, the subject, who relates to all this going on out here as something separate from me. When we investigate that, we find just the scene, the heard, the sight, the sound, thought, sensation. That's it. And when we try and locate that, we can't say anything about it because we have to take a position to do so. And in taking that position, we assume that vantage point of the subject. I assume I'm here to be able to refer to that over there. So then we get lost in this, and what becomes more and more obvious is the way thought augments itself onto the sense perceptions to make it look like I am here, sensing that out there, that I come first and whatever this is comes after, that I am assumed to just always be here as the subject, as something separate, as the agent, as the small self, relating to life, and I know what it is. It's knowable by me, but if we're honest, it's not knowable. Inherently it knows itself. Inherently it's obvious, it's aware of itself, it is. That's what we are. Do we need to take a position as something separate from that to understand it? Or can we just let go of all that and get lost? Or let go of that assumption, let that assumption be lost in the mystery of whatever this is, which is never figured out from a subjective position. It doesn't have to be. It's here, it's available. So then the reality of those assumptions, they lose their realness. They're seen just to be thought augmentations. They're seen to be something that's not actually here. Yet they're made of the same mystery. They're made of the same immediate apparition, not separate from anything else. Making it look like things are separate. Making it look like I'm here, separate from my experience. That I'm in control, that I'm moving along a linear timeline. As an independent, discrete entity. And the deeper we let go into this, the more we see how everything is so seamlessly interconnected, interdependent, that it would never be possible for an agent to actually exist separate from that and be fully independent, to be fully autonomous, to be fully in control or fully clued up on what this is. It's just so impossible, so simultaneous, so interconnected, so singular or non-dual. That any seeming movement or tendency to move back from that, to lean out from that and take a position as something, it just becomes uncomfortable. It becomes not interesting anymore. Because it's impossible. Experience can only be experience. It can't be anything else. Oneness can only be oneness. It can't be anything else. There's no way out. There's no way to stand back from this and control it. That's what's free about it. That it doesn't need to be anything. It doesn't need to be understood. It doesn't need to be contextualized or conceptualized or referred to from any sort of inherent position. All positions are that. All thoughts appear spontaneously, mysteriously, as this, as experience, as non-dual nature. The separate subject doesn't have to exist to experience life. life experiences itself without the need for those limitations and distinctions. It's this already, it's happening already. So notice the tendency to seemingly move back from life, to relate to something, anything, from a position of something, anything. Become familiar with that tendency, that movement, and it just comes up automatically. And then fades away, comes up, automatically fades away. It's as transient as the rest of this. Now, when we look back to that background, that subjective position, that nothing that, and say, in which everything appears but not separate from it, we see how impossibly paradoxical this is. And in that, the objective frameworks, the conceptual frameworks, just lose their reality completely. Because it seems like there's a background here, there's a canvas here upon which all of this is appearing, a centre point here referring to all this that's always here, but it's not there. It doesn't exist. You can't find it. And when you can't find it, you become it. You drop into it being nothing. So then your experience of yourself is everything. It's the ongoing process of deconstructing these deeply felt, deeply held assumptions. It's a process of dismantling, of regression, of dissolution, of returning to simplicity, not moving out into complexity. And in that is all you need. And that is everything you could ever want. It's complete, it's free, it's infinite, and there's no need for anything in it. There's no lack in it. There's nothing missing in it. It's so complete, it's so whole and so intimate that you can't even talk about it. You can vaguely point towards it, but the source of knowingness, or whatever this is, can't know itself objectively as something separate in it, because it all is that. And that is, if you could say anything, what you are. So anyway, that'll do for now, and I'll talk to you next time.